Probably the most controversial game in recent memory, this game needs no introduction. However, the depth behind it might be a lot more complex than you might think. Was it really the reason why the Saints lost that game? Was it really the reason for their playoff utility? Let's find out. Rivalry actually starts in 1967, all the way back to the very first game the Saints ever played, which surprisingly came against the Rams of all teams, eh? Yeah, this was a beatdown, like 27-13. The Saints barely stood a chance at all. In fact, the Saints initially used to play in what was then known as the NFC West with their arch rivals, the Falcons. Yeah, the league was weird, but eventually they played there until the realignment in 2002. Yeah, no, this wasn't a very equal battle. In fact, 90% of the time it was the Saints going up against a far overqualified Rams team that would go on to lose the playoffs. Fortunately for the Rams, they actually got over the hump in 1999 and pulled off a Super Bowl win. But then the tables sort of flipped. The Saints came back to bite the Rams in the ass in the NFC wildcard game in 2000. I will give them this. This hopefully wouldn't be a theme of the Saints losing to the Vikings in embarrassing fashion. They're the second team to beat the greatest show on turf in the playoffs. Guess they were tired of being a punching bag for the Rams for so long. And if you had any hopes of a high-octane NFC West, you're wrong. The Saints relocated to what was then created as the NFC South with their brethren in the Falcons and Buccaneers in 2002, and the rivalry pretty much went comatose. That is until you bring up Bountygate. Now, prior to his leaked involvement, Sean Payton had actually strong-armed Greg Williams to get the defensive coordinator position in St. Louis for the Rams of all. And what do you know? 3 months later, the NFL finds out about the entire Bountygate scandal. Good going, Sean. Payton, it seemed, wasn't done kicking the hornet's nest, and after his controversial victory over the Colts, well, rumor has it, he began to fall out of favor with Tom Benson, eventually to the point of considering a job with the Rams in 2016. However, it was soon determined to be false, and Benson just dumped a ton of money to keep Payton in New Orleans. Meanwhile, the Rams had begun their relocation back to Los Angeles and had attempted to rebuild what at one point was a pretty bad team with their first overall pick in Jared Goff. Despite Jeff Fisher, Goff's first career touchdown actually came against the Saints. Yeah, problem is this is Jeff Fisher, the king of 7-9, and in this case 4-9 before he was fired mid-season. Well, fortunately, they replaced him with Sean McVay, who actually did a rather good job. He rebuilt the Rams' offense around Jared Goff and got them up to an 11-5 record that season. That season, he also got a 26-20 victory over a formidable foe who was also rebuilding. Just as the Rams had retooled, so had the Saints. They also had an 11-5 record in 2017. Both of them would go on to go 13-3 the very next year. Eager with something to prove, the Saints seemed ready to clash head-on against the Rams the next season. Here's where it gets good. Trust me. It seemed all those years of failure had finally paid off, and now they had a boatload of cash to throw around at some high-profile free agents that season. Rams began that season 8-0. 3 weeks prior, they pulled off a very violent victory over the arch-rival Seahawks, but wasn't a clean getaway. Pro Bowl receiver Cooper Kupp and Pro Bowl cornerback Aqib Talib didn't make it out of the game unscathed. Then Payton strong-armed Michael Thomas to do this. With limited passing defense and a limited passing core in general, this infuriated the Rams. Really infuriated the Rams. Players like Tyler Higbee, Cooper Kupp, and Jared Goff were beside themselves and raged as they entered the locker room after the game. Normally, the level-headed team found themselves beside themselves full of fury after that incident. Fortunately, Thomas got slapped with a $30,000 fine from the NFL. Enraged at the loss of the win streak, Marcus Peters had this to say to a reporter.
With you on him one-on-one.
Tell Sean Payton, keep talking that we gonna see him soon. You feel me?
Fair enough.
Yeah, because I like what he was saying on the sidelines too. So tell him keep talking that and I hope you see me soon. You feel me? And then we're going to have a good nice little bowl of gumbo together.
Eager not to be outdone, the Rams won the next 5 of 7 games. And they were a team on a mission. They wanted vengeance. They wanted to do more than just beat the Saints. And after a hard-fought victory over the Cowboys at home, it seemed like they'd punch a ticket to New Orleans to punch Sean Payton back in the face. You couldn't have asked for a better set stage. He had the 2 best teams in the NFC who absolutely hated each other. These scrappy 2-year playoff teams and longtime rivals finally had something to prove. Finally, with Aqib back at full health, they've managed to embarrass Thomas on national TV. TV, revealing a flaw in the Saints offense. Regardless of Thomas being locked up, Kamara still gave the Rams a bloody nose, and eventually the Rams were down 13-0 by the end of the first quarter. Second half felt like the Rams really didn't improve much better, albeit they were still on the board in terms of points. Felt like their ride had finally ended. LA, it seemed, wouldn't have a champion. That is, until halftime. Seemingly spurred on, like a Spitfire in the Battle of Britain, the Rams galvanized and reignited themselves ready for the second half of the game. And they showed up. Yes, it seems, the Rams got themselves out of the corner, got off the ropes, and gave the Saints a painful black eye. Now they showed up ready to fight. They had 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, and the entire night they held Thomas to 4 catches and 36 yards. Yeah, then this happened. Yeah, if you ask a Saints fan, they're not going to remember all the points they gave up or how poorly Thomas played. They're going to remember this. I'm not going to dispute whether or not it was a PI, because it clearly is. But the real question is, did it even matter? The Saints offense just clearly gone home by that point. The Rams only held them to a touchdown in the entire third, and then held them to a field goal in the fourth. The first half, while they're giving the Rams a thorough thrashing, they had a 61% completion rate and a 28% conversion rate. In the second half, they completed 23% of passes and converted on 5% of drives, all leading to them failing to keep the game from going into overtime. By this point, the Rams had emulated Hurricane Katrina and completely silenced the dome. Yeah, they were dead in the water by that point, resulting in this.
For grabs and caught, picked off by John Johnson.
Now here was the Spitfire taking out the Luftwaffe. Did the call even matter at this rate? I should also point out that they actually signed my football at Rams training camp last season, just in unison for their hatred of Michael Thomas. Yeah, by this point, there was no question who was winning this. This time it was their defense's turn to let Gurley rush right all over them and end up putting them in field goal range. He knocked the game-winning field goal in, and that was it, sending the fledgling Rams to an ill-fated Super Bowl. Now, though looking at the call, did it really cost the Saints the game? I'm going to say no, due in part to Mr. 4-36 having this to say.
As far as next year, we're going to come back, and we're going to come back with revenge for sure.
What did you see on the play?
I saw exactly what you saw.
His reward for such arrogance was an albatross of a contract that is likely going to destroy the Saints in the next 5 years. By that point, the gauntlet was laid down, but this was still a must-see rivalry. In fact, I grabbed my girlfriend, we went and saw them at the Coliseum for week 2. The Rams ass-blasted them, 27-9. It was then that I realized they had the last laugh and had another 13-3 record. They lost to the fucking Vikings in the wildcard round. So anyway, to revert back to the topic, was the non-call really to blame for that kind of a loss? I'm gonna say no, because seriously, their offense, all they had to do was retain rigidity and just keep the Rams from scoring and maintain such a high-octane offense on their own, and they failed to meet any of those expectations. I mean, regardless of my bias, regardless of the rivalry, the fact is that they had multiple opportunities to really go back for another ring, and they just failed to meet any of them. I feel like this is well summed up like Michael Thomas. It doesn't matter how many catches you make. The thing is, if you're not converting, if you're not scoring, you're not going to win the game. I hate to sound like Booger McFarland, but it's pretty obvious that they were just set up for hype and not much else. I mean, consider, how do you lose to Kirk Cousins in the wildcard round going 13-3? I mean, come on. All of this I feel is just well-deserved karma for Sean Payton's actions involving Bountygate, for Michael Thomas's ego, and it feels deserved. In fact, considering their cap situation is a lot worse now they threw a ton of money at Drew Brees, and obviously the aforementioned Michael Thomas contract, they are going to be in a lot of trouble. And all of this makes me feel bad for the NFL's perennial good guy in Drew Brees. Easily a first ballot Hall of Famer, but it just sucks that he's going to be like Brett Favre and only ever get one ring. I'm hoping at some point he either revitalizes his career, or when Payton probably leaves, or when he decides to go to a real team who can actually use him without any corruption and actually just fulfill his goal. That's all I want for him. As for the Saints, I feel like the karma's still well deserved. And the fact of the matter is, after this upcoming season, they're going to take a brutal hit from that cap hell, and they're going to see a lot of people start to leave. For instance, Alvin Kamara is one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL, and he's due for a re-sign. Now, I know for a fact the Saints don't have that kind of money on them. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got informed a little bit from the history of the actual rivalry itself, albeit it's quite an underrated rivalry, I must say. Anyway, if you think I'm being biased, feel free to leave me a comment and tell me why. If you have another opinion on the non-call, be sure to let me know too. Anyway, thanks for watching, you guys.